After the chameleon reforms of the 4th century BC, the Roman army of the 3rd century BC had gone through a drastic change since the 4th century BC. This is possibly due to the many conflicts that Rome had faced during the 4th century BC, such as the wars with the Samnites, Etruscans, Greek city-states, Italians, and Latin tribes. Because of these conflicts with their neighbors, it is highly believed that the Roman military changed by the 3rd century BC, possibly into a more practical design compared to the earlier century. In such, the military system of the Roman units in the 4th century BC had either been incorporated into new units or were outright removed entirely. An example of this is with the leves ascensi and rorii, in which could have been incorporated into other military units, as the leves and ascensi would have been formed and meshed together. That would make the Roman velites, while the rorii would have been incorporated into the hastati. In fact, in the 3rd century BC, the arms and armor of the Roman army changed entirely from the previous century. The Roman Principes were the common Roman military unit of the 4th to 2nd century BC. This unit would later become known as the Roman Legionary of the later centuries, and in such a design of this unit would carry on throughout the history of the Roman Republic and into the Roman Empire. In such, this unit was known to be the heavy infantry that helped form the Roman Republic into the Roman Empire. Principes would wear a form of wool tunic. This design, and such, was heavily used by the Roman military throughout the centuries, and in such came in multiple designs of colors, rather than just one uniform coloration design. The footwear that would be worn wouldn't be the infamous caligae until later centuries, possibly into the 2nd or said 1st century BC, possibly because of the style of Roman military change, as in the 3rd century, the Roman Republic wouldn't change their form of footwear until later on. There are some accounts that the hastati and the Principes had actually used greaves, however, could possibly only afford one, though this is very little information that we can use to go on. There are accounts of sleeveless wool tunics being worn underneath the shirts of mail. Roman accounts actually state that this actually helped protect the user from the thrusting blows of an opponent, possibly just in case if the mail would not suffice in protecting the user. Some historians even argue that this design might have been copied from the Celts. The lora calmata is one of the most infamous type of armor that the Roman military copied from the Celts, as there are accounts that the Romans acquired this armor mainly by fighting against the Celts of Gaul, or possibly in northern Italy. It is unknown, though, of how they did or when acquired it, but, to say the least, the Roman military would later use it on throughout the centuries. As well, a doublet would be worn over the shoulders in order to provide more protection, especially from downward chopping blows, like that from a Celtic sword, or even that of a falcata, or even that of a copus, depending on what the warrior was using upon them. Leather belts would also be worn, however, these type of belts would not actually be of an everyday design. In fact, there are accounts that multiple designs of coloration and symbols were actually possibly put in the belts, possibly to indicate of a man's family that he belonged to. The sword of the Roman military at this point was actually the infamous Gladius Delius, or Gladius Gallius. This was a sword of the Roman military from the 4th to about all the way into the 1st century AD. It is unknown though how long this sword was used, but it is indicated that this sword had started to fall out of favor by the time of the 2nd century BC. The helmets that were worn by the Principes was the infamous Montetifino design. This would be the infamous style helmet used by the Roman military all the way from the 4th century and even into the 2nd century AD. Possibly because of how easily the head helmet was made, or possibly because there were so many designs that it kept being used throughout the centuries. The Roman scutum shield was the infamous shield of the Roman military. This type of shield was actually heavily designed and heavily reinforced with a central reinforcement bar. This design, as you see here, would be used from the Roman military even before the 4th century BC, possibly starting around the 5th or even 6th century BC, and all the way into the 1st century AD, until being replaced by the later Roman scutum design. But it is unknown. And finally, the pilum. The pilum was the infamous Roman throwing javelin. This style of weapon was copied from the Celts of Iberia. However, during the 4th and 3rd century, many historians argue on how the Romans acquired this form of throwing weapon.
Britannorum